Behind a desk in Mexico City sat the man we were looking for. As president of the Union Theological Seminary, Dr. Noonan was a busy man. But like all the Protestant workers we were to meet, he had a warm welcome for visitors from the States. Jane and I introduced ourselves and explained that we were on vacation here. But we had promised our church that when we got back home, we would give a talk about Protestant work in Mexico. So we decided to do some research and hoped Dr. Noonan could start us out. As he read the letter of introduction from our minister, he seemed pleased and gladly agreed to help us. What did we want to know? Well, it's hard to ask questions when you aren't acquainted with the subject. And I guess Dr. Noonan could see that we didn't know quite where to begin. So he started telling us some of the things he had learned during his many years of service.
I remember it was a long time before I even began to understand Mexico and to realize how deeply this land has been influenced by its history. Centuries of foreign rule have left their mark everywhere, along with the traditions that came to Mexico from the Old World. But when the Mexican people won their independence, they turned their backs on the Old World, and since then have cut their ties with the past even more radically. Even so, the old ways still survive. Today, the past and the future stand side by side. To many Mexicans, the past is hateful. Their only thought is to build as quickly as possible for the future. And this they're doing. Wherever you go, you'll notice the contrast between the new and the old. And because of that contrast, the loyalties of many Mexicans are torn between the future and the past. Despite modern reforms, there are still some groups who fight progressive ideas. I'm glad to say the Protestant churches are not among them. For we Protestants are looking ahead. And I think we have a lot to offer because we apply our beliefs with a clear eye to the future needs of the people. In the villages and cities of Mexico, we're working hard, especially for the children. And it's wonderful how eager the youngsters are to hear about Jesus. For the older children, Protestant laymen have built good schools throughout the country. And every one of them is full to overflowing. Maybe you notice some of our social centers on your way down. Even the smallest ones have filled a tremendous need in the lives of countless children. And of course, everything we do is based on our churches, which are growing in number every year. It would take a long time to describe all that we have accomplished and all the problems we still have to face. But if you want some good first-hand information, why don't we join the seminar downstairs in the patio? Every so often, we invite a group of Christian workers here from various parts of the country, and Pastor Alvarez has them talk about their work. It's a good way to keep everyone in touch with what others are doing. So maybe this is just what you're looking for. Anyway, make yourselves comfortable.
Perhaps some of you have not heard very much about our new rural center. Well, I am a student there and can tell you a little of what we are doing. When I first arrived, I almost wished I had not come. But then Mr. Martin Spot hurried down the platform to say hello. Right away I began to feel better, especially when he asked if I was not hungry after my journey. I will always remember that first day, meeting Mr. Martin and driving out to the farm. Of course, compared to San Luis Potosí, where I had been going to school, this village seemed tiny. But someday, I shall preach in a farming village like this. That is what the center is preparing me for. So I was really glad to be here. As we drove along, I learned about the new center, about how much there was to do and how I could help to make it a success. The only thing that worried me was having to face a reception committee. Only a few of the boys were my age. Most of them were younger. And the center was not as big as I had expected. But I kept remembering Mr. Martin's words. We are just beginning here, he had said. We are leaving plenty of room for growth. Leading me across the yard, young Pepe told me more. The new dormitory was not built yet, and until it was, we were living in the house that would someday be our recreation and dining hall. It was all very new to me, but I felt I would like my new home. I guess I was a little hesitant about that first supper. But there were friends inside, and a good meal. Before long, that door was as familiar to me as the daily schedule. 6 mornings a week we are in class, studying regular courses like history and math and literature. Besides that, we have our Bible studies, for many of us will go on to the seminary. There are other classes too. You see, the church needs men who will settle on the land instead of in the cities. And Mexico needs good farmers. So we are studying agriculture and learning about irrigation, fertilizers, crop rotation, all the things that will make us better ministers to farmers. That is the goal of every rural center, to train evangelists for the fields. And often, when I think about my future, I pray for guidance in the years ahead. There is a lot to learn on a farm, and we are learning fast. The animals have to be fed, and the little trees we are planting around the yard need even more attention than the new calf. We are building too, learning what a lot we can do with just a little. For instance, instead of buying bricks, we are making them ourselves, the way a farmer would. Perhaps this sounds old-fashioned, but adobe bricks are strong. In fact, we will soon have enough to start building a machine shop where we can work on our new farm equipment. and learn to keep it in good condition. My first lesson on the tractor turned out to be fun for everybody, except me. I certainly had a bad opinion of mechanized farming that day. Soon, though, I began to understand how much the center is teaching us. Already, we have improved our fields more than seemed possible, working toward the day when we shall take our message to farmers all across the land. But when that day arrives, we shall be ready with more than material help, for we shall be planting the seeds of the gospel, seeds that will bear a harvest of faith in Jesus Christ. The Bible says, "The harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few." Well, there will be more workers soon.
To tell the truth, Jane and I were surprised. We just hadn't realized how active Protestants were in Mexico. But now that we had a chance to find out, we were anxious to hear from the next speaker, a woman from an industrial city in the north. Senora Moreno looked rather placid. Then she started talking about the 2 social centers she had founded. They were smaller than many, she conceded, but don't forget, they were the first in the state. Another thing, they were on the wrong side of the tracks, where they could do the most good. I could see that Senora Moreno was a woman who fought the good fight.
Really, I do wish every one of you could pay a visit to Goodwill House and meet my teaching staff. All of them are former pupils who have come back to help. And that is good, because it means that we are succeeding, that we are helping our youngsters to grow up into responsible men and women with active Christian ideals. During the morning, our younger children get their classroom work, and they love it. Mind you, we cannot compete with the regular schools, but we can set an example. And in everything we do, we can show these children our ideas of the Christian way of life. And that is what counts. All our work, whether it's teaching arithmetic or planning a sports program, really has a double purpose. One is to prepare children for the future. The other is to help them enjoy the present. And this last one is often harder than you might think. For instance, let me tell you about young Carlos. Carlos usually is full of mischief, but one day he started to behave strangely, and I soon decided I had better try to find out what was wrong with him. At first, nothing would make Carlos talk, but later I joined him as he started for home, and then the whole story came out. Apparently, his family was having financial troubles, and so his favorite sister was leaving home to become a servant. Carlos was heartbroken, and when I met the girl, I felt she was unhappy too. But she explained there was nothing else she could do. She had wanted to be a secretary. But studies like that take time and money. While she talked, I had been thinking. Then I made up my mind. Somehow, Goodwill House would have to add a class in shorthand and typing. As I often do when I need help, I turned to my associates at our Protestant school here in town. This time, I needed shorthand textbooks, notebooks, and office manuals. Then, of course, there was one other item we need before we could start, a typewriter. It seemed a lot to ask for, but after all, the Lord said, "Ask and it shall be given." So I asked. Within an hour, I was heading back to Goodwill House, and the problem of Carlos and his sister was solved. Well, mind you, it could not stop there. Already in these last few months, our new class has grown. Boys and girls who were strangers have joined us and become friends. Basically, I guess it is not possible to help just one person, because what helps one is bound to help others. That is why I believe our Protestant work has a great future here in Mexico. Of course, there is much to do, but if we keep helping those who need us, we shall succeed. I know it.
The deep sincerity of these Christian workers was as inspiring as the stories they told. And their inspiration came through prayer. For as the meeting ended, they rose to their feet and thanked God for the opportunity to serve, asking only for strength to do more. Jane and I were deeply impressed and welcomed the chance to meet and talk with others. Of course, we knew we had only scratched the surface, and we were eager to hear or even to see something more. I think Dr. Noonan knew this, or perhaps he had planned it that way. In any event, when he came to join us, there was a twinkle in his eye. He already knew our talk about Mexico would be a good one, but I think he wanted it to be more complete. Maybe that's why he introduced us to Chico, one of the many young evangelists who had volunteered to leave the comforts of the city, to work in the villages where there was the greatest need. Dr. Noonan waited and watched. He knew that Chico's enthusiasm was infectious. It certainly infected us. For when we heard that he was leaving to visit his village parish, we quickly accepted his invitation to go along. No tourist guide suggests a walk of 2 miles from a bus stop to a tiny village. And the colorful descriptions of travel folders never capture the real beauty of the countryside. Now, for the first time, we began to feel the warm heartbeat of the land. And we discovered the peculiar beauty of the cacti and maguey plants, even though they symbolize man's struggle for food against the parched earth. We learned that these were the roads Chico traveled daily. This was country he knew well and loved. In the village, we saw proud farmers whose roots were deep in the earth they tilled. Theirs was a proud tradition. But here, tradition had become a way of life which sometimes seemed inflexible. It was Sunday, though, and we had to hurry. For Chico's congregation awaited him at the abandoned schoolhouse he was using as a church. It was a poor place, or so it appeared, but the quiet dignity of that church seemed to capture the spirit and love of those who worshiped in it, building a living faith. Poor as they were in material things, these people were rich in the spirit of Jesus. After a service we shall never forget, we asked Chico about those dedicated people. Who were they? How did he win them? Chico replied by starting at the beginning, when he arrived with only a Bible. And the beginning was simply talking with the villagers. People who had long been used to accepting the strong voice of tradition. People who had no choice, but people who needed and wanted something more. Chico talked and listened to everyone much as Jesus did 2,000 years ago. He was friendly, and he made friends easily. He was always ready to listen to a story or to help with a problem. Whenever it was time to leave a home, he was always asked to come again. The first group meetings were with children who gathered to hear the stories he told. These were stories from the Bible, stories which the children loved to hear. Bible stories they had never heard before. Chico knew them all. That was how Chico first planted the gospel in Toxipetl. Already it had borne fruit. Armed with Christ's message, he had found a growing audience. Now Chico was not alone. He wanted to show us what can be done when the spirit and strength of men are fired with a purpose. This was the home of the village mason, one of Chico's new congregation. It was the home, too, of a dream, for here a new church had been born. And with the strength of a new faith, that dream had come alive. This much had been done already, and now work on the roof was to begin. An event which would be celebrated at a service only 2 days off. We knew we would be there. Our report from Mexico can never capture the strength and freshness of spirit that surrounded us that day. Nor can we ever describe the dignity and sincerity of these people. All we know is that just then, we felt a greater hope for a Christian world than we had ever known before. Standing there under the Mexican sky, thinking of all that we had seen and heard, Jane and I were glad we had come, for we had rediscovered the vigor of our Protestant faith, a living, progressive faith of love, of sacrifice, and of service. We would have a lot to tell.